Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on this Wednesday in the Locher Room. I'm Alan Locher. Actress and author Melanie Smith is here today to discuss her new book, Unfinished Business, available for pre-order now and out August 8th. Melanie, as you know, is well known to TV audiences for her role as Emily Stewart on As the World Turns, Tora Ziyal on Deep Space Nine, Lucy Montone on Curb Your Enthusiasm, and Jerry's girlfriend Rachel on Seinfeld, to name a very small few. Melanie knows from personal experience how complex and immovable grief and trauma can feel. She used that experience to fuel her research into the issues of trauma, loss, and finding happiness, which led to the creation of Unfinished Business, an 8-step actionable process that will help anybody overcome heartbreak, emotional wounds, limiting beliefs, old patterns, and unconscious habits, as well as the negative self-talk, self-judgment, overwhelm, and misalignment that have held you back from succeeding in love, relationships, business, finance, and health. With her guidance, Melanie will help clear out the heartbreak, trauma, and grief of your past and make space for joy, hope, and possibility, giving you the self-awareness, clarity of vision, and the courage to create the purpose-filled life we were all meant to have. Please help me welcome Melanie Smith to the Locher Room. Hey, Melanie.
Hi, honey. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you so much for being here. We talked about this back when you surprised Haley, you and Mary Ellen. You had mentioned it, and I said I wanted to do something. So I'm really, really, really happy we could do this today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It really means the world.
Well, before we get started, first of all, Mary Ellen and Mark came to visit. How was that?
Oh, it was so great. Mare and I just have so much fun together. We have clicked for so many years. We're just soul sisters. We laugh all the time. We love the same things. We can go deep. We can keep it light. It's really a great bond. And I love Mark too. And my Bert loves Mark, so that's great.
That always helps. I mean, it really is incredible, though. The show. What it brought you in so many different ways.
Oh yeah. And now look at my girlfriend in Naples, my colleague.
I mean, look at that. How fun is that the two of you are down there?
The nicest teeth in Oakdale.
Was it fun catching up?
Oh, it was so much fun. And it was like yesterday too, that's the thing about those kinds of connections. You can't like create old relationships. They're either old or they're not, right? So it's like having that history and having that kind of bond. It's a shorthand. Not a lot of people can embody the experience that you had being on daytime without ever being on daytime. So it's really a fun kind of a bond. And also, being able to talk about really important things with friendships, through friendship and talk about healing and growing and
Wow.
So many things happened between when I left and our worlds today. Yeah.
And she's been through the ringer, our friend.
Yeah. Colleen has had a lot of heartbreak and trauma.
Yeah.
And she still lives such, a joyful and creative and full life, and she's still so beautiful.
Ah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Unfinished Business, as I said, is available now and out August 8th. Why did you write the book?
Well, it's funny, Alan, I just had to write a piece for an online magazine about my process behind writing the book. And I actually wrote this book during one of the most traumatic periods in the history of the United States, which was during COVID. And
what a great realization, but you're right.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really, I mean, that's an understatement even, really, because we really did not know what was happening in our world. Nothing like that had happened in this sort of lifetime for most of us.
And what we're actually feeling the reverberations still. Because what occurred during COVID, so much was lost. People lost their sense of belonging. People lost their jobs. People lost people that they loved. People lost who they thought they were, right? The list goes on. And in reverse, companies and cultures realized what they could get away with. So they started changing paradigms that people felt safe in. And now that's different, right? Office buildings are vacant. So look at the impact of that. Landlords, banks, Wall Street. I mean, the infrastructure, and it's not like it hasn't happened before in history, right? You know, we went from, you know, coal to electricity. Like, things have changed and we've had to improvise and pivot. But such a mass shift. And as I talk about quite a bit in the book about three brains and how we follow our instincts and our heart and our emotions, at that time, I had COVID. I didn't know I had COVID.
Wow.
But I was in New York and I was one of the early cases. And I was lying on my couch. I couldn't breathe, barely. I had a fever. I couldn't taste. I couldn't smell. And I had been replaying in my brain all these conversations that my clients had been having with me because they wanted to bring the work to their families, their parents, their children, et cetera. And I'm just one person. So I had done webinars and I've taught workshops, but it just came to me at that point, you got to try to write this book. Now, I'm not a writer, right? I have written for magazines, but I've never written a book before. And so I honestly didn't think I could do it. But I had come across and met this really brilliant ghostwriter. And when she saw the workbook that I had written, she was like, you don't need a ghostwriter. Like, you can't even have a ghostwriter because you will hate it. You will just end up rewriting the whole thing yourself because no one's going to sound like you. So I took her advice and I wrote the book myself. And it was not easy. It took almost, well, you do the math. What is it? Almost 4 years? Yeah.
Wow. Well, tell us what the title Unfinished Business means and why you chose that as the particular title.
So my original training, you know, my early studies in psychology, et cetera, and depth psychology, that's just a real part of me. But as I was training to be a coach, my first training was through the Gestalt Institute of Philadelphia. And I started studying Gestalt therapies and practices in the world of coaching. And in the Gestalt theory, unfinished business is a big deal. If we don't find closure with things, it creates a tolerance and it shifts what we focus on and it shifts how we live. So we really do want, and I say this in the book, we want to feel the snap of closure. Otherwise, the brain and the body doesn't let go of it. So remember, I think I even said to you once, it's like having all your windows open on your computer when you're tolerating all these things. And I like to liken it, like, imagine you're in an office and somebody's got their headphones on and there's like this dull music playing and you hear like this, and you're okay at first. I don't want to be an idiot. I don't want to be mean. And then after a certain period of time, you can't stand it, right? That's what tolerance is. And that's what starts to happen internally in us when we don't finish our business. So why I picked unfinished business is because it's all encompassing. It doesn't make you cherry pick a love relationship. It doesn't make you cherry pick the loss of a dream or loss of control of your body or illness or relationships with the children. It's all of it. It's any business in your heart and soul that is incomplete.
I find it fascinating. What people watching us right now, to share with them, what will readers find in the book?
Well, first of all, they'll find a pathway to understanding themselves. You know, we believe the things we believe, but why? Right? We don't all have the same belief system, we don't all have the same modeling in our history. We don't all see the world the same way. And until we start to understand that every window we look out, even if you're looking out of a window from the same household, it's a different angle, right? We have to examine who we are, what we believe, what is our programming. You know, from birth till around the age of 7, we operate almost in a hypnotic state and we buy it all. So if somebody tells you something, you believe it and you live your life within the inner structure or the ecosystem of those beliefs. But they're not real. So when you see these people who are groundbreakers, right, who are fearless, they don't have those, they may have other beliefs, right? Because I've also worked with these incredible groundbreakers that have other beliefs that inhibit them in other ways, right? But we don't see our own glass ceiling. And we just keep banging our head against it. People come to me all the time, stuck, because they don't know why they keep bringing the same relationships into their lives that fail, or they can't figure out their purpose, or they can't leave something that makes them unhappy, or they keep having problems with money, or they keep having problems with health, weight loss. You go back into the archives of a life and you find arteries that give you the information of places where energy has to be unplugged, has to be released, so that you can have clear, clean soil to replant the things you want in. You can't just keep watering the weeds. You got to get rid of them so you can plant the flowers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally. Before I forget, your old client Brian in Boston is watching and says hello.
I love you, Brian. I miss you. He's going to love this metaphor because he has the most incredible gift with gardening.
That's great. And Pam was asking, will you be doing an audio version?
That's a really good question. I'm talking to my publishers about that now. Yeah.
It must be difficult to do because we have to do a lot of work in reading the book. So you only can lead to a certain point and then we have to take that work, right?
Yeah. And something I do want to say, there is a typo in the book. I'm going to throw this in really quickly. There's the website has a slash instead of a .com for all the downloadables. So when you get to that part of the book, add the .com and remove the slash and you'll get the downloadables. I can't believe that happened after all of the work and the perfection of this book. It was so upsetting. But anyway, next printing, it will be fixed.
Wait, tell me that again.
So in the book, we have downloadables like you were talking about. You have to use certain things from the book and you don't have to use the downloadables. You can use your own journal. But if you want the beautiful downloadables that I had designed, they didn't print the website for the downloadables correctly in the book. So
I'm gonna put that on YouTube. So tell me what it should say.
Wait, I have to look it up.
No. Then afterwards, I'll email you.
After. Okay.
I'll do a reminder to do that. So let's go back to Oakdale and As the World Turns. You left the show at around 28 years old while playing an amazing character, Emily Stewart.
A traumatized character, by the way.
Traumatized character, for sure. And she continued even after to get more traumatized. Correct. She had been traumatized from the get-go. I mean, her mother was an alcoholic. That's trauma starting out, being born, for sure. I didn't realize this, and I don't think fans had realized this. Talk about what drove your decision to leave at that time.
My mother was dying. And it was out of nowhere. I had gone home for a party for my sister, and my mother started having stomach pains. And within a matter of weeks, we were all in Philadelphia, staying in, I don't know, some awful little hotel because we had to get a floor of rooms because of all of us were there. And she died. It was progressive. It was a really aggressive and ugly form of cancer. And she spent the next 3 to 4 months actually dying. And that's when I just kind of said, I can't focus. I can't be doing this right now. And I left. Doug was amazing. Doug really wanted me back, would have done anything to keep me on the show. And I just really had to focus on that. And then so much of my heart and soul went into the understanding of what was happening to me during this enormous loss issue. She was the first person I ever lost. And she was probably the closest person to me in the world.
Prior to her dying and losing her, was any of this a part of your world? Like, were you interested? Had you studied it in school or anything?
Well, I studied psychology, but
Which, let me interrupt, is always there's a correlation somewhere. It's been brought up on my show so many times about actors and psychology.
Yeah. Of course.
So many of you that I've had the privilege of speaking to have studied it as well. And it's fascinating to me.
Well,
like, there should be a book about actors and psychology.
And do it in reverse. What is one of the most successful forms of psychotherapy right now is psychodrama, which is essentially taking therapeutic issues and putting it into the context of drama, right? So as actors, let's just go back to Emily. I got to live inside a traumatized person. And by the way, everybody, we're drawn to these situations because we feel a relational connection to trauma because most of us are traumatized. We just don't think about it that way. We think of trauma as PTSD. You know, he came back from war. He was an officer, or he was a police officer and saw some killing or had to kill someone, etc. That is not what trauma is. Trauma is when whatever the experience is that shattered our internal center continually returns over and over again in our lives. So trauma is not what happened. It's what happened inside of us because of what happened, right? So we were watching a show where, like, just look at Emily. Emily was traumatized on a daily basis in front of your very eyes, right? And so are so many people, right?
I mean, you and who we were talking about earlier, Colleen and you, both involved with, Anthony Herrera, with James Stenbeck.
I mean, think about it. Your love interest is an international drug dealer, right? And the stories go on and on and on. And we're fascinated by that because there is something that rings true to us. We want to know on some level, we are not alone in our pain. And when we look out today, here's another reason when you ask me, why did you write this book? When I look at the world today and I look at the illusion and what people are longing for that really isn't real, right? We're looking for an escape from our own pain, from our own feelings of not being enough. But the funny thing is we are all enough. And just because somebody's presenting an image doesn't mean they feel like they're enough. So trauma and the wide chasm of feeling healthy or traumatized, it's just getting broader and broader. And that's a really critical reason why I did write this book today, because I see more and more, not just those of us who have been traumatized. And remember, Alan, you and I have talked about this, generational trauma, right? Children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, children and grandchildren of Depression era babies, children and grandchildren of war, right? That's real. Why do children and grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, when they go to restaurants, take the bread and the sugar packets, right? It's real. I have many friends and family members who do that. Well, because it's modeled for us, or it's a deeper belief system that is inheritable. So, understanding trauma and psychology and acting it out. So when you say, did you have this interest on world turns? Possibly, right? I also had a traumatic childhood. I was born very ill. I had major surgery when I was 11 months old. They did not use anesthesia on me. They used ether, which only paralyzes you. They didn't realize that then. I had a family of 6. I had a difficult sister. I watched my mother have her first stroke when I was 5. I found my mother after her second stroke when I was 11, and I had to get her to the hospital. And I was left there once the ambulance took her away to think she was dead for about 5 hours, right? Then she had cancer. Then she had the cancer that took her life. And then my sister was killed in a tragic car accident. So was I in training for this work? Was it my curriculum? Yeah, I do think it was.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Your cousin Barb is here and says, I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I love you, Barb.
Kristen says, you're such an inspiring woman, Melanie. Looking forward to reading the book.
Thank you.
You left the show, you know, your mom passed away. What were some of the first things you did for yourself, trying to understand grief and trauma at that time? I mean,
one of the things I
that's
started,
a young age as well.
it was
to
young age.
lose a parent. Very
young age to lose a parent. I had so many questions that I wanted to ask. You know, there were questions I didn't even know I was going to want to ask, right? And we were so close. But I started noticing something no one talked about, which was that things happen here when you go through loss, not just here. And I don't mean just crying or feeling sad. I mean, I became claustrophobic. I didn't want to go home anymore. I just always wanted to be out. I was constantly distracting myself. I wasn't crying unless, like, I wouldn't cry and then I'd stub my toe and I'd get really angry. And I started to wonder why. Why? I remember years ago, I saw a Goldie Hawn movie with Burt Reynolds. I think it was called like Best Friends or something. And she's crying while she's stirring a pot of soup. And he says, what's wrong? And she says, I'm just thinking about my parents dying. And he said, what? I didn't even know they were sick. And she said, no, I'm rehearsing. Right? Like, and that didn't happen for me. I didn't cry a lot when my mother died, but other things happened to me. All these systems shut down. So I became very curious. Why? Why is this showing up here and not in the ways that I read about in books or saw in movies or people talk about? So I became very, very interested in what we now call the soma, right? Not just the body, but the experience of the body. And I started taking yoga classes and I started to learn how to meditate, which at that young age, with everything going on in my life, didn't do a whole lot yet, but it did start tilling the soil a bit. And so that was that first crack in my beginning to research this topic. I moved on, of course, from there, and I studied with Elizabeth Kubler and John Welshans and Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk and Anna Dea Judith. And these people became lights in the world of whole healing, not just talk therapy, not just thinking your way out of things without feeling movement. And that was really where it began and continued when I moved to LA, where I met really my greatest teachers, except for people like Bessel and Anna Dea, though Anna Dea was West Coast. I really worked with her more once I was on the East Coast.
And you headed out west. You were still pursuing your career.
Yes.
How long after mom passed did you go west?
That's a really good question. Not long, because mom died. We went through all of that, you know, it wasn't long at all, because I remember I went to take my driving test, and here was another traumatic event. My father lost a lot of his sight and a lot of his hearing, which was very challenging for my father. And I remember after my mother died, I did not have my driver's license yet because I lived in Manhattan. And I went to take my driving test, and I did the parallel parking, and I backed up over a hedge. I said to the officer, I have to get my license. My mom just died and my dad can't drive.
Oh,
And he
God.
gave me my license, which is terrifying, by the way. And I moved right out to LA after that. So it was pretty close. It was pretty close.
I'm coming back there in 1 second. Colleen says, hello, guys. Been watching since the beginning of this wonderful conversation. Love you. Come back to Florida, Mel.
I miss you. I'll be back very soon. And we're going to go get Indian food, honey. Okay.
Ooh, that sounds yummy. Yeah, I lost after the dad.
Oh,
No, doing that late in life, getting your license, which means studying. Were you always a great student?
No, I was always really good at certain subjects. I remain untalented and ill-prepared in other subjects. I am great with money, but not with numbers. One of the things, and I will tell you what I said to my guidance counselor in high school when he called me down to the office about my math grades. He said, why are you one of the best English students in the school and one of the worst in math? And my response was, well, Mr. Battaglia, numbers are not my friends. They do not tell me stories. So money is a story. Numbers are not. So I was not great at things like math or any kind of math, right? Geometry, more geometry than anything, because there are some stories there, but trigonometry, any of that kind of stuff I was not great at. I was good at some of the sciences, good at history, but I excelled at English, literature, writing, creative writing, art, that law. I was advanced placement and those things. But I did have ADD and I do have dyslexia.
Which I also think Kelly Hensley does, which Kelly Manahan has, I think.
Maybe we don't, there's a real upside to that stuff.
I know, but that's also very interesting that both ladies who played Emily would have that same.
Well, it was on the character breakdown.
Good one. But, these subjects, what we're talking about today, you are fascinated by, you are dedicated to, you have dove in head first. So going to California and, trying to figure all this out, were you searching for something going out west? Were you diving into your acting career, head first?
I think intuition played a very large part in it. And, that's a really great point, Alan, about diving into things, right? I do think that the people in this world, humans, dive deep into things that they profoundly want to understand. Most of the healers are broken, right? So when we're really proficient in something, it's because we needed it. What does Toni Morrison say? Write the book you can't find, right? I needed to find a process that could let me live my greatest life that didn't exist yet. I'd been to therapy. It wasn't working, right? But I had to be my own alchemical laboratory. When I got done with an experience, I asked myself, did that help? Did I grow? Did something shift? And so I became my own laboratory. Now, what was interesting is I don't think I thought to myself when I went out to LA, oh, I'll get to the bottom of this, right? I think I was led, and I ended up using that time in that environment to seek out the people that could balance me and help me grow and heal. And that is what I did simultaneously, because I also was working constantly.
You were working constantly. Absolutely.
So I was spending the weekends traveling, doing retreats with some of the greatest healers in the world. And then during the week, every day I would do my practices, meditation, yoga, all of that stuff. I am still a voracious reader. I read constantly. whether it's the news, whether it's self-help books, whether it's, novels. I read constantly. And so that is, my soul was fed by that. And when that imbalance started happening, like I needed to focus more on helping people. And what was very fascinating is as I focused myself energetically on helping people, more and more people came to me for help. Right. And then it becomes a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So that's sort of what happened in LA.
And you were exploring all of these things on weekends. Some of this prior to your sister dying tragically in a car accident?
Yes. Yes. And one of the things that occurred when my sister was killed. Now, it's fascinating because so much of me operated as my own witness.
What do you mean?
You could be inside of an occurrence and then collapse internally. But while I was experiencing it, something was watching over me going, that's interesting. That was different than when mom died. How come you had that reaction? Somebody died. Why isn't it the same reaction? Well, that was a tragedy. Mom's was a heartbreak. Roseanne's was a tragedy. I wanted to, by the way, I wanted to show you. This is my sister who passed away.
You should. Oh, I love that. Oh, what a beautiful photograph.
Yeah, she was.
Was that like her school picture? What is
her
that?
Engagement picture. And this was my mom.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I wish we had gotten them in advance, but that's great.
Sorry.
That you showed them.
I can.
I mean, they are absolutely two different losses. I mean, that absolutely. Something so unexpected as your sister is just. I
had just left her, and I talk about this in the book. She had called me.
I know. I knew you were going to say that. You're going to make me cry again.
Yeah, she had called me, and I thought, I'll just call her the next day because it was like 11 o'clock at night.
Which let's stop the conversation right here and say to everybody who's watching, call somebody back immediately.
Call somebody back immediately. You never, and tell people you love them, right? Like, I'm so grateful that the last time I saw my sister, I said, we sounded identical, by the way. We looked very much alike, but I mean, I literally wasn't allowed to answer the phone at her Shiva because people freaked out. I used to get on the phone when she was in high school and I'd talk to her boyfriends for like 20 minutes and then she'd be like, give me the phone.
That is fabulous.
So don't ever be afraid that you tell people you love them too much. Like I tell my son I love him all the time. I probably drive him crazy, but I do it anyway. Because we don't know. And we are on this planet to love and be loved and to share our souls and to fix each other's thatched roofs, right? That's why we're here, for the exquisite experience of being human beings, loving other human beings. And the only reason we come towards each other is either to give love or to get love. So if someone's coming to you and it doesn't feel so pleasant, on some level, they need love. And if someone's coming to you and it feels terrific, it's because they want to give love. But always the fundamental underlying desire is around love. So always be willing to say to someone, I love you. You look beautiful. You made my day, right? It's huge.
It is. And some people just have a hard time expressing any of those emotions. And I think that is something I do all the time to friends. I hang up the phone to my sister all the time, even if I don't want to talk to her at that moment, but I always, I love you. I'll text you, all of that. But I think it is truly important. Around the time you left World Turns, you started asking yourself questions.
Yeah.
Were those, the whys?
I think the first big question was, why me? Not why me, but why me? Like, what am I supposed to do with this? This is an uncanny chain of events, right? It's an uncanny chain of events. How do you start? And by the way, just really quickly, my surgery when I was a child, I was brought into the hospital to have life-saving surgery. While they were prepping me for surgery, they accidentally gave me salmonella poisoning. So I had to be left in critical care, and my parents left, and they said they would let them know so they could come back to the hospital. My parents had to go back to the other 5 children we had in the family. The day of my surgery, Kennedy was assassinated. So roads were closed all over, and my parents couldn't get back to the hospital. Now, here's what was so crazy. Kennedy's assassination was announced on As the World Turns. Okay. And then my mom, when I was healing, rocked me to As the World Turns.
Right. Your mom watched As the World Turns, right?
Oh, she was obsessed with it. Obsessed with it. I make a joke. I never wanted to be an actor. I only wanted to live in Oakdale. So, right? So anyway, when you look at the chain of events, I had a curriculum, you see, and we all have to look at our lives like a curriculum. What am I in training for? Don't take heartache personally. Take it as an invitation. What can I learn about myself? How does this make me better? Where do I find meaning? How can I love bigger? What wisdom did wounding give me? What is unique to me in my process of understanding how to heal from the things that have hurt? Just that shift in perspective can change the way you live your life. And that's really what unfinished business is about. It's not just the work to find closure. It's also, who do you need to be to live a life that's next level? That's a higher way of thinking. Not in the mud or in the pain that we can so easily get captured by.
Fascinating. Just made me think, I was 33 when my dad died and 41 when my mom died. So
right.
Young.
That's so young for both.
For both. Yeah. Well, they were both young. They were 10 years apart, but they both died around the age of 70.
How did mom die? How did dad die?
Dad died in his sleep, which was made me angry at first because he had been in the hospital so many times, but he did clearly state he never wanted to go back. So that truly was the best way for him to check out, because he had been poked and prodded so many times in a hospital. He never wanted to do it again. And he went down for a nap in an afternoon and didn't wake up. And yeah, I mean, we don't get autopsies in, the Jewish religion. So, right. I would assume that is what happened. He had a pacemaker. And mom, mom, Holocaust survivor, breast cancer survivor, and then lung cancer got her.
And by the way, when we look at the correlation of the energy system and the organs and emotions, lungs are grief. And that's a lot of grief surviving the Holocaust.
Oof.
Yeah. But
a strong woman to survive that, to survive breast cancer, and then,
that culture is that's a whole other conversation.
Well, that's where I think of like the work you're doing, any type of therapy. My God, Holocaust survivors, if there was any group of individuals who needed a place to talk about what they lived through.
Unbelievable.
I
just finished watching A Small Light.
Ooh, what's that?
You have to watch it. It's a beautiful story of Otto Frank's assistant
Yes, I've wanted to watch
It's
that
beautiful.
immensely. Yes,
And then I went to see Leopoldstadt, and I just saw Parade. So
I did see
it was
Parade.
the trifecta.
I did see Parade. I would love to see Leopold.
Yeah. Well, that's exquisite. You have to pay attention.
Yeah,
Really pay attention.
I hear. I'm curious. When do you recall the first person that you helped, that you met with? Like, how did you?
It was very
Start?
interesting. And here's something else, I always say the universe doesn't necessarily pick who's qualified, but it will always qualify who it picks, right? So I had a client. I used to work in nutrition as a coach. I had a wellness center, and it was a yoga facility, all of that. So I started to delve into functional medicine. I went back to school for nutrition and functional medicine. And
what does functional medicine mean?
It's really first line therapies. It's about really preventing, right? It's about preventing illness, not trying to fix where you're already broken. So how do you really take care of yourself? What are the therapies that keep you strong? Diet, alternative modalities. So functional medicine is very much about frontline therapies before you get sick, right? And so people were coming to me through those arteries, and I had this CEO come to me because he wanted to lose 65 pounds. And with my help, he did. And then he walked into my office one day. This is when I had a physical office. When we all had physical offices. And he started to cry. And I wanted to go, what? You're skinny. You're in your skinny jeans. What? And he said, I realized I didn't come to you to be skinny. I came to you to be happy.
Do you refer to him in the book?
I do. I think so. Yeah.
I think there's something. I love that about the book, by the way, sharing, individual stories.
Well, I felt that was really important because, first of all, we learn best through metaphor or through examples. Like literally learning through metaphor and example leaps a hurdle of learning. The brain can process information so much faster through metaphor and story. So I decided to use my client stories, and they're altered a bit for privacy reasons, but
of course,
I decided to use them because it's the best way to prime our emotions to receive the data. And just subconsciously now we have a person. Every client story aligns with the work in that chapter. So we somewhere in the back of our minds hold then a model of that work that I'm talking about. And that is why I decided to use that.
Wow. Take us through the sort of research you've done for the grief and trauma. Like how much of your time was spent and getting you to this place to be able to write this book and this process out?
All of my time, when I look back, since I was probably in my young 30s, has been spent on research. I spend most of my money on education, right? I have gone back to school for behavioral economics. I've gone back to school through Rotman Institute in Canada. I went back to school for entrepreneurship and understanding how to build. And I did that through Sloan School of Business at MIT. I went back to school for obviously nutrition, functional medicine. I went back to school with Tal Ben-Shahar through Harvard for positive psychology. I went back to school. I had a client come to me who wanted to master the music industry. So I went back to school at the Clive David Institute of Music at NYU to study fundamentals of the music industry. Everything that comes through my or across my life, I take as an invitation to learn something. When I started one of my deep studies, not just in-depth psychology, but was in archetypes and depth psychology, but archetypes and the energy system and the chakras. That was such a huge portal into this work, because once I started understanding Eastern medicine's philosophy, not just Eastern spirituality, I'm talking about scientific philosophies, codified information, and how it aligned with Western. And when I started working with Harvard University's Institute of Coaching, which I'm one of their founding fellows, I started noticing that we were taking Eastern scientific understanding and we were kind of taking credit for it and substantiating it in the East through a lot of this information in positive psychology, which, listen, Martin Seligman came up with something really wonderful at UPenn, but it wasn't new. It was actually quite old. So a lot of my studies spent in the Eastern philosophies, the Eastern traditions, and the Eastern sciences, I then brought back to the understanding in the West. And I spent so much time studying in the West only to be able to write a book that says, now, don't question this, because all the science is saying. And what is science really? Physics. It's information that can be repeatable, that has patterning, that we can go back and find again, and we can prove it. So if I were to distill everything I do and all the philosophies I live my life by, I would have to say it's physics. If it makes sense once, it will make sense again. And if it keeps making sense, then something can be grown, healed, remedied, or elevated by it. And that's really all of my studies. And I went from the far to the far, right? I went creative all the way to the scientific. And I really, really studied with the finest teachers in the world. It became my mission and my passion.
And I feel that wholeheartedly from you. How many philosophies, scientific, I don't know the right words,
modalities,
have you brought together in the book? Because I'm sure this is your book. This is what you're doing to help others. So you can take the best of all of that and put it into your
it's such a great question.
Vision, per se.
What I want to tell you and everybody right now is, even if you study 1,000 different modalities, 1,000 different philosophies, 1,000 different religions, it's all distilled back to the same thing. So you can look at my work as finding the center of everything I studied and overlaying it so that it is a skeletal structure that the patterns align. There's probably thousands of philosophies, modalities, beliefs, sciences within the book. But quite frankly, look at all the diets. Let's just take something really simple. Look at every diet that you ever study. Yes, they're different, but do any of them tell you to eat McDonald's all day? Do any of them tell you to eat a cake for breakfast, dinner, and lunch? No, they're all the same. They just change it slightly so they can copyright it, right? Mm-hmm. But fundamentally, it's pretty much an alignment. And that's what you start to realize when you study with so many different teachers. You go, oh, I've seen that before. That was said, whether it was by Paramahamsa Yogananda or whether it was said by Bessel-van-der-Kolk. But it was said. You know, we have philosophies that people throw all over Instagram today, and I'm like, kind of Aristotle. You know, that's old. And that was the other thing I studied, comparative religions, and I studied philosophy.
Well, I love that you actually used religion as a talking point just now, because it is true. You know, I mean, let's face the facts. There's so much war, fights, death over religion, but it is all based in a belief in something, it's there is not a lot of differences. We
We're
are all,
all trying to get closer to the divine.
yeah,
Whatever you want to call your God, we're all looking for a connection to something greater that gives all of this meaning. It is not more complicated than that.
correct. And does not deserve the,
Well, I love what Elie Wiesel said when I went to see him speak. He said, for so long we've been fighting about whether or not Jesus is the Messiah. And he said, my answer is when he comes back, we'll ask him. Right? Like, why are we fighting? Let's love in the meantime.
we're missing out on that love a lot these days. For sure. Talk about the process. So you've been developing this for over 20 years. What will a reader go through? How does the process unfold in the book? So someone who's watching, and many people who've said they're going to order it. So
yay. So the process is very simple, but it requires you to do deep work. So it's very simple. It's kind of 1-2 buckle my shoe, but it requires you to be honest and to go deep with yourself. You don't have to show this to anybody. This is all for you. But it starts with an unearthing, right? We have to start to, as I say in the book, till the soil. Let's kick some stuff up. Let's figure out what's old, what's going on. You got to take a real flyover over your life and see your impactful events, traumatizing events, heartbreaks, losses. And remember, traumatizing events and losses are not always just negative, right? So for example, when I got pregnant and I had my son, it was the greatest day and time of my life, but I had to give up being many, many things that were a loss. So we're going to evaluate all of that first. Then we've got to look at, where does your patterning come from? What were your models? What were the mantras? What did you hear all the time? What were the unspoken behaviors? Like we just talked about, right? Why do I grab for bread and packets of sugar? Where did I learn that? What is that belief, right? There's a deep belief that scarcity. You may not use that word, but you're living in scarcity, right?
Why do you think my basement is stocked with everything?
See, but you see, that's a belief system. I had a woman come to me years ago. She said she and her husband fight all the time about a sponge, the way they wash the dishes. And we got to the bottom of it. It was like she was so berated by her mother and father about the way she washed the dishes that to her, it was just simply the right way. And if you didn't do it that way, it was wrong. But that's just a belief that belonged to her. That's not a universal belief.
Right.
We have to investigate, why do we believe what we believe? Why do we do what we do? Why do we think what we think? And why do we limit ourselves where we limit ourselves? So that's really the next part of the work. Now we go to, what masks and acts do we start to create, which I explain as acceptance and approval create tricks, right? We've all seen the movie, what's that called? Mean Girls. Right. And Lindsay Lohan comes as this like cool kid who comes from, I don't know, South Africa or something. And then in order to be accepted, she becomes an entirely different person. Mm-hmm. That's what happens to all of us, whether you go and you become the pretty girl or the smart girl or the athletic guy or the class president or whatever it is that gets you into a place of success. We then adopt that as our identity. But we have to go back and look at, what is the original memory of the self? Who are we? See how you can get stuck in the wrong life when you become the wrong person? We have to go back and look at that. Then we start to address, what energy got trapped in the body? How does it get triggered? What happens to you when you're triggered? Because when you're triggered, you don't remember, you react. How does that impact your life? And starting to understand the bodily or the somatic sensations around trapped trauma, heartbreak, loss, and disappointment. That's cumulative since the time we were born. How does that show up in your life? What triggers it? And then how do we get to the point where we can pinpoint it and release it? Then we start looking at the who's, and we start being able to say goodbye to what no longer is. This is no longer mine. I don't have to live in this place. I can say goodbye and I can recapture my freedom. Then we reframe our lives and then we plan ahead. That's it. All scientifically supported.
Bravo. I wanted to read, Clay says, Melanie Smith, you are one of the most fascinating people in soap history.
Oh.
Yeah, it's crazy. I love that you
for that, by the way.
Say it again.
I said thank you for that. That was really
I love that you encourage people to follow the process in order and fully commit. And I mean, that's with anything. I mean, if you want to make change, we all, and me included, you included, everybody, we have to commit. I mean,
absolutely. And loss is a part of life. Our hearts are made to be broken. So if you learn the skill of loss, you will be able to live freely. That's a key. Learn the skill of losing. And then there will be nothing that you'll be afraid of winning.
Beautifully said. As I said in the book, you have, these different stories that you share. I was going to ask, do you have a favorite story? But is there a client, not that you can talk about, is there somebody you've helped that just, they've come back to you years later, or something that is a story you are able to sort of?
One of, I think, the most powerful stories I talk about in the book was one of my most resistant clients. And I was intimidated because it wasn't that long into this part of my work. And he was an Ivy League professor. And he came in.
I'm sitting like that now.
And he said, I don't believe that you can help me, but you come highly recommended. So go ahead and try.
Oof.
And, I schwitzed a bit. I thought, like, do I want to run for the hills? And he's like so smart. And I went up, I'm going to take the challenge. And both his wife and his son had committed suicide. And he had not gotten back to his life, a very intense looking guy. And we worked together for, I can't remember, it was 6-8 months, something like that. And he really showed up for the work. I was blown away. Once he stepped in, it was like 100%. And after we finished our work together, I thought, okay, I hope something, because this work, by the way, will shift as time goes on. It shifts you. It's like, it has a cumulative effect. About 6 months after, I was sitting in my office and my assistant came and knocked, and she said, there's somebody here to see you. Okay, send him in. And he started talking, and I'm thinking, who the heck is this? Like, didn't look.
I remember this one.
Right? Yeah. Didn't, like, when I first met him, like khakis and loafers, and the hair was slicked back with like a really intense blazer and a button up. And he was in like this cool linen shirt and like worn jeans and loafers with no socks, and his hair was messy. And he now was like sailing, and he fell in love again, and his whole life. And he walked in, and all he said was, Mel, I don't know what you did, but my life is like it's never been before. And he left, and I just started crying. Because
those losses, to suicide, all loss is hard, but again, that is tragedy at its, that is hard loss.
You never get answers.
Yeah.
You never know if you could have stopped it. I mean, there's so much to it. This is the other thing, and I talk about this in the book. Guilt is a useless emotion, but the feeling of guilt is a breadcrumb to data, right? what do I believe I did wrong? Right. And I do talk about guilt and shame. So guilt is concerned with the other, but shame, guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. And so there's different data held in both of those energy systems. Guilt is, what did I do wrong? Could I have helped them? Should I still be here if they're not here? Shame is, I'm nothing. I'm a failure. I don't belong here. etc. But teaching people to use those feelings as information, not as a form of punishment. That's the only time they become useful, is if you search for the data in them, not if you punish yourself with them.
Incredible.
Survivor's guilt, right? Survival's.
Oh, for sure.
Those are stories.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You had a successful career. Do you miss the performing?
Yeah, sometimes I do. Sometimes I miss acting just for the sake of the way it felt, to be in the moment of experience that has not yet happened, that you're creating. Like, what does Sondheim say? You creating a hat where there was never a hat, right? You're making a hat where there was never a hat. There is an experience that never existed before, that through someone's words, you get to bring alive to everyone's surprise. That's a sensation like nothing else. And yeah, I do miss that, but I only miss it in really moving work, right? I don't want to do thin, silly stuff. I want to do either really funny stuff or really moving stuff. That's the best use of me on this planet, no matter what field I'm in.
Would you ever consider doing it again?
Yeah, absolutely. If it was the right work, for sure.
Well, yeah. You're going to release music, right?
I am. My LP, my album comes out in 2024. So excited. I recorded with Lady Gaga's band, the guys who won the Grammy for the Tony Bennett album. So these cats, that's the music term. Now these guys were and are some of the most talented musicians in the world. So I was so blessed to work with them. 7 of the songs I wrote, 2 are covers. I wrote an intro to the song Smile, like a jazz intro, right? Like the old days.
Yeah.
I wrote with my producer, Tipan, and then I covered a Joni Mitchell tune. So yeah, there's 9 songs. It's called The Broken and the Breaker.
Well, it just dawned on me, you need to have a show in New Hope.
A show in New Hope.
Do like a cabaret.
I can, but I could have Mary Ellen and Colleen sing with me.
I just mentioned singing to Colleen. She was like, she was like, I haven't done that in years.
Well, I love Colleen. She said to me one day at breakfast, she's like, you lose a lot of chutzpah as you get older. And it's true. Like, I'd walk into a burning building when I was younger. Now I'm like, oi, it's hot. But who knows? Yeah, I may do a record launch.
Yeah, you totally. I mean, people would come out in droves. When you think back on As the World Turns, happy memories?
Oh, so happy. Growing up in that world, it taught me everything. I don't know who, and I've said this to my fiance, Bert, I'm like, I don't know who I would be today if it was not for As the World Turns. That was the turning point of my life. It was the ramp up and the trajectory of what became of me. It gave me discipline. It gave me courage. It gave me a voice. It built friendships. It taught me how to tell stories. It taught me how to be respectful to a process. You didn't work, and Colleen will tell you this, Mary will tell you this. You don't work with people like Liz, may she rest in peace, beautiful Liz, Larry, Kathy, Lisa, Collie. You don't work with those people and show up even 1 second late. You don't not know your lines. You don't miss your mark, right? What else? What other job in the world could I have had that would have taught me that kind of discipline? So there was that. There were the lifelong friendships I built. There were the experience of being able to express myself fully, to be able to use the whole instrument that was me, to understand psychology in a whole different way, and to help others see themselves by mirroring the human condition. So all of that in a job where you got to check. Come on. And by the way, I discovered in Hollywood doing films and primetime and sitcom and all of that, that the format of daytime was actually the best. It was like stage. That's what I loved about it.
You definitely practiced your craft more in daytime than in any other form of film or primetime television.
100%, because daytime is an actor's medium. Primetime is an editor's medium. So they are different, and a director's medium. Yeah.
The last thing I'll read, which I love, Randy says, I wonder how this knowledge Melanie now has influences or could influence your future acting.
And wouldn't it be interesting to see the characters that could come alive with the wisdom I hold now, right? And what vessel of a character could hold that wisdom? That would be exciting, right?
Absolutely. You, my dear, I wish you the best. I hope to see you in person one day. You really are doing good work.
Well, you're coming out to New Hope.
I will come out to New Hope. I will come out to New Hope. Before I let you go, how's Gideon doing?
He's amazing. He's in Philly now. He left Pepsi, went to Coke. I say they won the taste test.
I do prefer Diet Coke, so I'm on Team Gideon now.
There you go. So he's close to mommy. We just had his 24th birthday. He's gorgeous and as loving and as wonderful and as funny as ever. I adore that kid. We're still so close. I just, there's nothing like the love between a mother and a son. So very proud of him.
Absolutely. Mary says, I can't wait to get the book. Please have a book signing in Scranton.
Oh my God, we're working on that. And I also want to say to everybody who's listening, life has so many things to offer, and we've all been heartbroken. It's not just you, all of us, even the people that look shiny and new. We've all been heartbroken to degrees other people don't understand. And we've all experienced trauma, whether it's the drip, 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 drip of trauma and people saying negative things to you, to trauma that you can see outside, right, in the world. Do the work. You're here for a short time, as long as life is. Really get to it. Do the work. Learn to love yourself. Learn to build the life of your dreams. And it will be an experience that you never even imagined. I'm here to tell you, because I've been through a lot, and I'm one of the happiest people you'll ever meet.
You really are. You really are. Thank you, Mel.
Thank you, beautiful soul. I will talk to you soon. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
I'll email you so I get the link and put it up for everybody for the download.
Yes, please do. Please do. I'm sending everybody so much love.
Bye.
Bye, love.
Thanks, everybody, for joining today. Remember, Melanie Smith's book is available now, Unfinished Business. It comes out August 8th. Please join me this Friday, July 14th, when actor, writer, director, comedian, and photographer Sean Thompson stops by. Sean will look back at his time on Guiding Light playing Simon Hall and fill us in on what he's been up to over the last few decades. If you haven't yet subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do so down below. Turn on the notifications for reminders of all upcoming shows. And remember, if you like to stream audio versions, you can download those as well. Just search The Locker Room on your favorite streaming platform. Have a great evening, everybody, and I will see you on Friday. Bye.